Sweet. All right. So let's start with a strange story. It's from right in the beginning of the Bible. It's actually the story of the family that God chose to be his people. So it starts with Abraham. Father Abraham had many sons. Many sons had Father Abraham, and so God chooses Abraham, and then Abraham has a son named Isaac. And Isaac, the God makes promises to Abraham, and those promises transfer from Abraham to Isaac, right? And so that works out pretty easily. But then Isaac has twin sons. And this becomes complicated because with twin sons, like I know one of them came out first. Like it's a big deal that, one of them, his name is Esau, comes out first. But like when you got twins, we're talking like minutes, right? So like it's always going to be kind of a rivalry between twins because even if you have one that's technically older and especially in their culture technically has rights and responsibilities and all these things, it works out in this story that the two sons, Esau being the older and Jacob being the younger, that it didn't work quite so well for Jacob just to be like, yeah, I'm good, let Esau have it. No, like in the story, Jacob wants everything Esau has. He's, the younger one, and we're actually told that their rivalry, their dispute, begins before they're even born, right? Like it goes all the way back. It's like in their DNA. It's in their bones, right? And so as the story progresses, Jacob is the younger one, but he ends up kind of like swindling his older brother out of what God has promised, a blessing and a birthright and everything. And he doesn't do it, like I said, swindling. He doesn't do it nicely. He does it through lying. He does it through deception. He does it, but he's not a good person as he does it. And so Esau decides, well, if his little brother is going to hoodwink me and this is what he's going to do, then I'm going to go ahead and kill him because that's the solution to our problems that human beings have very often. And so Jacob ends up like, okay, like now the birthright, God's promises go from Abraham to Isaac, now to Jacob instead of Esau. But Esau wanting to kill him, that leaves Jacob in the situation where he has to leave. And so he, his mom is like, hey, go to my homeland. I've got family there. They'll take care of you. And so Jacob leaves home and he goes to, be with his uncle, right? Like, or family member of some kind. And he goes and that's what he does. And the guy's name is Laban. And Laban treats Jacob exactly the way Jacob treated Esau, because that's how life works. Gets a taste of his own medicine. He's really deceptive and terrible, and so then he meets a guy who's deceptive and terrible, and that I don't like that. And so ends up with like an extra wife he didn't really want. Like he just wanted one. Ends up with two. Ends up with like 11 sons. Because he has two wives, so whatever. And so it ends up happening, and so he spends 20 years there, and Jacob realizes, like, look, I've got some stuff I'm supposed to be doing. I've got this birthright. I've got this blessing. I'm supposed to be doing this, and I should go home and do the thing that I wanted to do, that I should do. But the problem is his brother is still alive, so he's not sure. Like, 20 years is a long time. Like, think about what 2005 was. Like, 20 years is a long time. And he thought maybe his brother was over it, but he also thought maybe his brother still wanted to kill him. So he wasn't totally sure what was going to happen. So as he goes home, Esau sends like hundreds of soldiers to meet him. Hey, I'm still a little upset. And so that answers that. And Jacob says, okay, well, let me send you a bunch of gifts and an apology. And, hey, I'll just try to make peace here. And so if you can picture this, okay, like picture the scene. Jacob's been gone for 20 years. He did his brother wrong. Like he's the guy who was in the wrong. There's no question about that. And he comes back and, is going to be, potentially violence. And Jacob is trying to stop violence from happening. And so he sends these gifts. And the thing is, like, it's not a text message. You can't, like, tell him, hey, your gifts are on the way. You can't do that. It takes, back then, it took a lot of time. People had to, like, physically walk from A to B to get information. And so Jacob has some time to kill. He needs the gifts to get to Esau and Esau to react and then Esau to, send back word or come out, so he has some time. And so that's where we get to the weird part of the story. This is what we read in the book of Genesis happened while Jacob was waiting to hear back what's going to happen with Esau. It said, this left Jacob all alone in the camp. And a man came and wrestled with him until the dawn began to break. When the man saw that he would not win the match, he touched Jacob's hip and wrenched it out of its socket. Then the man said, let me go, for the dawn is breaking. But Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. What is your name? The man asked. He replied, Jacob. Your name will no longer be Jacob, the man told him. From now on, you will be called Israel, because you have fought with God and with men and have won. Please tell me your name, Jacob said. Why do you want to know my name? The man replied, and then he blessed Jacob there. Jacob named the place Peniel, which means face of God, for he said, I have seen God face to face, yet my life has been spared. The sun was rising as Jacob left Peniel, and he was limping because of the injury to his hip. So that's weird. Like, that's a weird story, right? Just want to make sure we all understand what happened. Like, we read it, but let's just double down and make sure we get it. So Jacob is in this camp all night. He's sleeping, he's trying to sleep. It's like all night. And here comes a guy, looks like a dude, shows up in the middle of the night. And he's like, hey, I'm here for a fight. And Jacob is like, well, okay, I guess I'll fight you. And they engage in fisticuffs for all night, which, I mean, like, we have UFC fights, and they have like 5-round fights. Like, you take a break. I don't know if they took breaks. It says for all night, like hours and hours, these two guys fight. And the weird thing is, they fight to a stalemate, to a draw. Like, nobody can know who wins. So the man cheats. Like, the man that enters the camp cheats and breaks Jacob's hip. Because he's 78, I don't know, breaks his hip or hurts his hip in some way. And Jacob probably says, ow, that was unfortunate, right? And so that's how the man wins the fight, is by cheating and hurting him. And then Jacob demands to be blessed or something and wants to know the guy's name. The guy's like, what's your name? And he's like, well, I'm going to change your name. I'm going to change your name from Jacob to Israel. And Israel, the name means one who wrestles with God, or one who fights with God. That's the word Israel, which is all sorts of hilarious. Those who fight with God, that is Israel. And so, fight with God, and then he realizes, oh, you must be God then. And so then he changes the name of the place, but then he's limping because the guy cheated. And that's the story. Here's why this is weird. Once you establish that this is not a man, but it's God, this becomes a very strange story. Because imagine that tonight you go home and you wake up in the middle of the night, somebody's banging around in your house, and you go out into the living room and the guy's like, I'm here to fight. And you're like, I mean, okay, no problem. And you guys get in a fight. And that fight lasts all night. And then he's like, I'm going to give you a name. Changing your name. And then he changes your name. Like, you would think a lot of things about that gentleman. I'm assuming it's not a woman that did this, for the record. You're going to think a lot about that gentleman who did, you might think, well, maybe he escaped from somewhere. Maybe he's on drugs. Like, maybe it's my mother-in-law in disguise. Maybe it's, I don't know what you might think. But, man, the long list you would get to before you said, I bet that's God in the flesh. You would never interpret that being God. Ever. A great many things it might be, but not God. And part of that's because, I don't know, just definitely not God. But part of that is, as Christians, we have already an understanding of who God is. We already have an understanding of the ways in which God has presented himself to us, how God has revealed who he is to us. So, we say that God is the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, right? Like, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords doesn't show up looking for a fist fight in your living room in the middle of the night. When we think about God, we think about God in a very specific, very exalted, very, high, elevated way. And we think about, even when we think about God like not being, super elevated, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, the creator of everything, the one who we made in his image, all that. Like, we think, okay, cool. Well, there's the incarnation, there's Jesus. But then we think about Jesus, like, I don't remember the Bible verse where Jesus gets in a fist fight with a guy. Like, maybe he was close when, clears out the temple. But like, I don't, that's not, we see, Jesus the way, he's the truth, he's the life, he shows grace and mercy and compassion, right? Like, that's Jesus. He's the good shepherd. Like, what is that we have all these like paintings of Jesus, like the traditional paintings, like, Jesus with the beard, he's looking down at a lamb like it's a baby. That's not a dude who wants to fight you. Like, he's feeding his lamb, like, we have very specific images of God in our mind as Christian people. And those images come from God revealing himself to us in a variety of ways, but mainly through Christ. And they don't really fit the guy who shows up in the middle of the night to wake you up and fight you. So this story is strange for us. But I think what's actually the strangest thing about this story is that it is actually not strange. Like, it is to us, but to the people who first heard it, to the people that, this is their story. Like, we took the story from different people. From the people whose story this actually is, it's their story, there's nothing weird about the story. This is the origin story of why the Jews are called Israel, how they got their name as a people. This story is not strange to them. This story is like bottom basement, foundational stuff. This is core things for them. To the Jewish people, this story where Jacob wrestles with God, this is a story that defines them. It's a story like for us when we talk about like Christmas, we talk about, Easter with Christ, dying and raised from the dead. It's that kind of importance to them. To Jewish people, this defines them. This defines who God is, and this defines who they are. This is why if you ask a Jewish person what it means to know God, they might as well tell you it means to argue with him. I mean, like, belief in God is a contact sport. It's not you just accept these things and then you're done. No. You're supposed to, according to God's people, the Jews, you are supposed to be interacting with this. You're supposed to be questioning and exploring and on a journey. Faith to them, and also, by the way, to us, this carries over into the New Testament, but faith in God is supposed to be us on a journey working this out. We work out our understanding of God. And so what that means is sometimes we do question things, and sometimes we do doubt things, and sometimes we can just say, I don't buy it. And sometimes we do say, well, I didn't buy it before, but now I do. And sometimes we say, well, I did buy it before, and now I don't. Being somebody who understands God, says the Jewish people, is someone who is in a constant give and take back and forth with our understanding of what God expects from us because of who he is and who we are. It is never a fixed static thing. We are constantly growing, constantly journeying, and we are constantly wrestling with God. That is what it means to be a person who is part of Israel. You wrestle with God. You fight with God. To believe in God is to fight with God. That's our faith. Which, by the way, is a really great lesson for us as an aside. That, right? Like, simply because we struggle with our faith, simply because it's hard for us to believe, simply because we don't buy everything, simply like so often the idea is, well, if I don't fit in this cookie cutter understanding of faith, I must be doing something wrong. I would argue if you're not in the cookie cutter box of faith, you're probably doing something very right. You as a person are acting like Jacob or Israel. You are wrestling with God. You are contending with God. The point then is, this story is not strange for them. But it is for us. Again, you would never interpret the man in your living room fighting you as that must be God. And yet that's the story of how Israel began. Which is to say this: God reveals himself to people in different ways. And it might be that God reveals himself to one group of people in one way and another group of people in another way. And both can be valid even if both are different. Because at the end of the day, this is simply God trying to communicate with us where we are, when we are, how we are. And for ancient Jewish people, they were in one time and place. And for modern Christian people, we are in another time and place. And we should not expect that everything they did, that God did for them, would make a ton of sense to us. Because God did it for them. Any more than we would expect that what God does for us, they would get. Because God did it for us and not them. Okay, so I kind of opened up a can of worms. The point is, we should probably point out this is not just about ancient stories with Jacob and Israel and all of that. Maybe a better way of, maybe an easier way for us to get this is an illustration Jesus gave one day. So it was the last week of Jesus' ministry. He's about to go to the cross. Like within a couple of days, he will be arrested and all of that. And he's kind of at the end, and you see Jesus at the end, like fully aware, like Jesus understands when he's going to die. He understands how it's going to happen. And he gets to the end of this whole ministry, and he's kind of like tying up loose ends. And so that's what the Last Supper is, right? Like he's talking to his disciples about, hey, I'm going to be gone. This is your responsibility. I want you to do this. I don't want you to do this. Please definitely don't do that. Please absolutely do this. Like that's the Last Supper. Well, there's also Jesus talking to like crowds of people, not just his disciples. And as he talks to the crowds of people at the end, he really kind of decides, I'm just going to let everybody know what I think of the religious leaders. And it's not good. It is not good at all. So Jesus tells everybody, like the crowds of people, hey, this is what the religious leaders are. Here's why they're terrible. You shouldn't listen to them. That's that. But Jesus also understood that, like, the problem with terrible leaders is that people follow them and then become terrible themselves. It's really the issue when you talk about, like, a bad leader. And so Jesus is now concerned about all of the Jews because he realizes the religious leaders of Israel have not been good. And so the people that follow them and trust them and obey them, those people, not so great either. And so Jesus, he's kind of, like, lamenting the fact of what, could have been and what is. And we read this passage, we read this thing that we see in the Gospel of Matthew chapter 23. Jesus says this, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills the prophets and stones God's messengers. How often I have wanted to gather your children together as a hen protects her chicks beneath her wings, but you wouldn't let me. And now look, your house is abandoned and desolate." Okay, let's set aside what Jesus was saying, because that's a whole other conversation. The illustration Jesus gave was that of a mother hen and her chicks. And it's not an illustration of like, the kingdom of God is like a mother hen and chicks. Like that's not, Jesus says that about himself. I wanted to be your mother hen, but you wouldn't let me. Jesus told the people of Israel, I wanted to be a chicken. And not just a chicken, I want to be a lady chicken, a mama chicken. That's pretty weird. That's a weird illustration. Like, of all, like, if I would imagine Jesus would talk about an illustration of an animal, he'd be like, I'm going to be a lion. I'm going to be a wolf. You want to be a bird? How about an eagle? Like, nobody ever said the eagles were finger-licking good. Like, if you're trying to depict yourself in a certain manner, chicken is not really the answer. So what's interesting about this whole thing is when you think about it, there's a few ways that this can go when you think about what Jesus is actually trying to say and what you as a person might think about this. So one thing, if you read a lot of modern people and a lot of modern conversations, the conversation goes away from the chicken pretty quickly and into the fact that Jesus refers to himself as female, right? He doesn't say, I want to be a rooster. He says, I want to be a hen. Those are two very different things. And so every now and then, people will make a very big deal about that. Because, well, are you saying that God isn't male? And I just want to throw out there that, like, if that's a concern of yours, I mean, there's another time where Jesus says that he's an old woman, so it's not just here, like he does it elsewhere too. But it's really important that we understand, right, that like God is the one who created gender. Like, I know that was controversial. We love to say that we did. We didn't. Like, God made this up. The concept of sex, the concept of gender, the concept of presenting as this, God made that up. And anytime you have a creator and a creation, right, the creator is not bound by the creation by definition. Which means that if we talk about God as if God is a something he made, we're doing it outside of this, right? God obviously is a being that, as the creator of gender, is not bound by one gender or the other. Therefore, God's just above that. So why does God present himself as gender? Well, because it's part of our world. Some language is gendered this way, some language is gendered that way. That's how it works. It's simply a way that God expresses who God is. Because if we actually could try to look at God and figure out what's going on with God, it would just be very confusing. We are the creation, he's the creator. It's all kind of too big for us. So let's not worry about that. Let's not worry about that. We could worry about it, but let's not. We also could look at this like I just already said, right? Like I just referenced KFC. Because what is a chicken to us if not food? Right? Like that's what a chicken is for the most. Like I understand some people have chickens as pets. Like I get it. Some people have lots of things as pets. I'm just saying, like, for the most part, most chickens that are born in this world, they hatch out of eggs, get eaten. So when you talk about like I'd like to be a chicken, we're not talking about like an amazing, awe-inspiring, worshipful being, right? Like we're talking about food. We're talking about something that gets made into nuggies and tendies, like we're talking about something that gets made into a chicken sandwich that we have. Remember the chicken sandwich wars? For like 3 months a few years ago, everybody was very passionate about Chick-fil-A versus Popeyes, which was absurd because the answer was obviously Popeyes. But everybody was very concerned for like 3 months with this whole thing, right? So, like, that's what we think of with chicken. So for us, it's a very strange. If you want to talk about like a mom, protecting her babies, what do we think of? A mama bear, right? Like it's always the mama bear, always the mama bear. And yet Jesus says chicken. But see, here's the fun thing. Let me just throw this out. I watched this documentary about chickens one day because I was very hungry and I wanted to watch a documentary about my food. And I learned this about chickens. Did you guys know that when we first domesticated chickens, we didn't eat them? It's true. The first human people who domesticated chickens used them solely for fighting. We were like, oh man, those guys look crazy. Let's throw them in a ring and fight them. Because that's what wild chickens are. They're like the Tasmanian devil. Like, just if you find a wild chicken, do not pick it up, is the point. Those things will mess you up. So the original people who domesticated chickens, this was a strong, like, violent creature. Like, you did not get between a hen and her chicks. When Jesus says, I want to be a mother hen, if I'm alive now, it means something to me. But if I'm alive a few thousand years ago, it means something else entirely. See how that works? And for us, when we look at what a chicken is, from our perspective, we may come to one conclusion and they may come to another conclusion, or we might just say, that's not my favorite illustration. And that is completely okay. Okay. A couple things we need to unpack here. A couple things that are real big. We put a bunch of stuff on the floor. Let's put some things back together. The first thing is this. When we talk about the illustrations and the way that God has presented himself to us, we need to understand that not all of them are for us. Like, I may have a deep appreciation for the story of Jacob wrestling God. And I do. Like, I say it's weird, but I actually I love that story personally. Like, it's something that, for me, I go back to again and again as being important personally to me in my faith. But for you, who's not Jewish, who was not alive thousands of years ago when this was done or whatever, this may not mean anything to you. And that's okay. Not every illustration is meant for you specifically. Not every presentation is meant for you specifically. God has attempted to present who he is, to share who he is, to reveal who he is to a large world filled with diverse people over eons. The idea that all of those things would mean something to you personally is just insane. It's just absurd. Of course, it's not all going to mean something to you. Of course, not every Bible story will be something that you personally can relate to. And so the first thing we need to understand is that we have got to become okay with that. Here's the truth of the matter when it comes to the gospel of Christ. The gospel of Christ teaches us two things. Number one, you are unconditionally loved. God feels for you and treats you in a way that is so hard to imagine. You are absolutely beloved in a way that you cannot even fathom. It is just incredible. And also, boy, does the world not revolve around you. These two ideas. And sometimes it can feel like they're in conflict with each other, right? Like, if God loves me so much, why can't I get what I want? But see, the gospel is about Christ. And Christ is the one who shows us that we are beloved. But Christ is also the one around whom everything revolves. The world revolves around Christ. The universe revolves around Christ. And so sometimes we get what we want, and sometimes we don't. We have got to be okay with not being the center of attention all the time. We have got to be okay with opening our Bibles sometimes and it not being directly spoken or speaking to you. We have got to be okay to say it's a big world with billions of people. Not all of this is about Drew. The gospel teaches us how beloved we are, but the gospel also teaches us that we are not the center of anything. And we should understand that we are not, our preferences, our beliefs, our opinions, those are not the things that everybody else has to adhere to. The church has done so much damage to people by just demanding that everyone's like them. It was never that way. Here's a news flash. If the Apostle Paul was in this room right now, none of us would be friends with him. That man was a Pharisee who then talked about being proud of how much he suffered and the violence of people. Like, if you read Paul's work and talk, like, Paul is not like a buddy of mine. You would not be like, hey, let's go watch a Chiefs game. He'd probably lecture you for, doing frivolous things like watching football, participating in oppressive systems of whatever. Paul's a serious dude. And listen, Paul's great, but he wouldn't be my friend. I'm an American 2,000 years after him. That's the point, right? Like, and Paul would probably not have been super good friends with Jacob. Because this is just the way this works. The world is not about us, and the world is huge, and it moves, and God is here for all of us. So that's the first thing we have to realize. Second thing we have to realize is that at the end of the day, like, almost all of this is metaphor. Like, almost all of this is just God trying to illustrate things. I say this a lot. It's a stupid illustration, but I'm going to say it again because it's really important. My dogs love me in a way that is almost oppressive sometimes. Like, stop licking me, right? And I love my dogs in a way that is almost unhealthy. Because, like, they learn to sit on the couch and lick me, like, from somebody. And it wasn't Stephanie, right? So, but right now, my dogs are in their room. They do not know that I am here. They don't know that I'm a preacher. They don't know that I'm a Christian, right? They don't know that I really like, hockey and, music that screams and tattoos. All they know about me, okay, is that I feed them, I rub their belly, and I take them outside. That's it. There is a gulf of information, like, between my dogs and who I am as a person. And I think it's really important we understand that God is like that to us. Like, yes, we know that he loves us. We know what he's tried to show us, of course. But, like, the same way that my dogs have no idea that I'm preaching a sermon right now, I don't know what God's up to right now. Like, what is God doing at this moment? I don't know. You don't know. None of us know. Is that even a valid question about God? We know virtually nothing about God. And so everything we do, everything we're given is basically metaphor. Guys, look, God is not a king. Like, I compared and contrasted Jacob, God, the guy who's fighting, with, the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. That's who God is. Guys, God is not a king. You know who else? You know who made up the concept of kings? Us. We said we want to be civilized. What's the best way to do it? Cool, here's this guy. We'll put him in charge. If he does a good job, we'll sing his praises forever, and his sons and other sons and grandsons and we'll hold the whole line. And if he's terrible, we'll cut his head off. That's what we'll do. We made up the concept of a king. So much so that when the people of Israel wanted a king, God was like, don't do that. Kings are terrible. And then we call God the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. What we're saying when we say God is the King of Kings, what we're saying is we have a concept in our minds of a person who has unconditional power and can make unilateral decisions and looks over us and hopefully does it well. God is like that, but way better. That's what we're trying to say. We're trying to convey God has this authority, God makes these decisions, God does these things, and God cares for us. That's what we're trying to get at. But we're limited by A, our brains, and B, our language. Here's how Paul, who I don't think would be my friend, puts it in his letter to the church at Ephesus in chapter 3 of Ephesians. We read this. Paul says, may you have the power to understand, as all God's people should, how wide, how long, how high, and how deep his love is. May you experience the love of Christ, though it is too great to understand fully. Then you will be made complete with all the fullness of life and power that comes from God. Now, all glory to God, who is able, through his mighty power at work within us, to accomplish infinitely more than we might ask or think. Paul says we cannot understand God. God is greater than us to the degree that we couldn't even think to ask what God can do. So let's try. But let's also understand that we don't fully get it. And so God presents himself as a guy who's fighting to Jacob. He presents himself as a chicken to these people who don't believe. He presents himself in all sorts of ways, King of Kings, Lord of Lords, all these things. All of it is an attempt to help people, us, who don't understand because we are limited to understand the best way we know how. And so that's why we sang a couple of the songs we sang this morning. Look, we started with a song called Lovely, and then we played Beautiful One. Those are the two songs this morning and for this sermon, and I don't like those songs. I mean, full disclosure. I'll tell you why I don't like those songs. I'm a male born in the 20th century. Okay? My wife is beautiful. A flower may be lovely. But singing to God that you're lovely, it's a little girly. It really is. It's a little girly, if you think about it. Not really my thing. Also, it doesn't have to be my thing. Maybe it's your thing. I hope it is. We're singing it and I don't like it. So hopefully you like it. Some of you, one of you, just one person. But the point is, like, that way of thinking about God, that way of singing to God is a perfectly valid, understandable way to express our faith in God. It's just not the way I would do it. We have to be able to be, as people, willing and able to do that. To say, look, that's not the way I would look at this. But if it's the way you look at it, great. Because at the end of the day, none of us know this stuff for sure. We are limited beings attempting to connect to an infinite God, and that infinite God connected to us in all sorts of ways. All sorts of different ways, from a lady chicken to a guy fighting in a camp. Everything in between. What God is trying to do is communicating to us where we are, how much he loves us, how much he believes in us, how much he knows that we can be the people we can be. I love this passage in Ephesians because Paul is saying, we don't understand all this. We can't possibly understand all this, right? It's too big for us. We can't even think about it. But he says, through his mighty power at work within us. Much as we don't understand, God is working within us. Much as we can't explain it or see it outside of a metaphor, God is with us all the time. All of this is simply an attempt to show gratitude, appreciation, and to, in some way, articulate what it is that we believe and how it is we can be the people that God made us to be. And so, yeah, I'll sing a song about how God is lovely, even if it's not like my favorite thing in the world to do. And sure, we'll tell a story about, all the various stories we have in the Bible, many of which don't directly feel awesome for us. Knowing that in all of his great, God has done all sorts of things. All of it is an attempt to communicate and connect to not just us, but everybody, but also us. And so there are things that do connect with us, that do feel right, that we do sing, that we do love, that do help us to understand the part of God's nature that he's trying to communicate with us. Understanding that at the end of the day, no matter what it is we believe, no matter how it is that we articulate, we are articulating simply a piece and a portion, and that God is bigger and grander and better than we could possibly understand. So this morning, we're in our 8th week. We got 1 week left in this series. One more song next week. We're in our 8th week of our series called The Songs We Sing. And as we talk about Lovely and Beautiful One, as we talk about Jacob, we talk about Jesus being a chicken, we talk about all that stuff. I should have talked about that. We think chicken is an insult, guys. In the 80s, every 80s movie is like fighting words. You call a guy a chicken, and like now you got to fight. That should have gone in the sermon. Yeah, but it's over now. So here's our lesson. We will never fully understand God, but he has revealed himself to us in different ways so we might know him the best we can. We will never fully understand God, but he has revealed himself to us in different ways so we might know him the best we can. We're going to sing a song. We offer an invitation each and every week to take God up on this offer. The Bible teaches us to repent to be baptized, right? Baptism is a picture. It's a metaphor. It's something that's for us that the Jews didn't do, right? Like the other, this is our thing, right? The Bible teaches that when we turn our lives over to Christ and we turn our backs on who we used to be and say, I want to do things God's way, that in baptism, it's like we are connecting ourselves to Christ's life, death, and resurrection. We're saying wherever he goes, we go too. We too are dead, buried, and raised. Never made a decision. Nice warm baptistry. Let's talk. If you're an immersed believer and you're looking for a perfect church home, it's not here. We do serve a perfect God. We want to connect. We want to call. We want to cultivate. We want to meet new people, share the gospel, grow up while we do it. And we want to be people who understand how beloved we are, that we are not the center of attention. And we want to be people who wrestle with God in the ways that we can, trying to connect as best we can. As we stand,